Hello and welcome to The Hash, where we talk about the latest in crypto news and culture. Let's get this going. I'm Zack Seward. We got Naomi Brockwell. We got Ben Powers. We got Jen Sanasie. We got special guest star Danny Nelson in the house. Naomi, start us off. What's our first story of the day?
So we are talking about hackers and Facebook. So a hacker just published personal data of hundreds of millions of Facebook users. This includes phone numbers, Facebook IDs, full names, locations, birth dates, bios, email addresses. It's a huge swath of information that is now public and is now freely available. He's put this out free of charge, and users are pretty angry that Facebook didn't do more to secure this private information. And meanwhile, governments around the world at the same time are trying to make Facebook less secure with our data, with the UK attacking Facebook's end-to-end encryption, which is a way that users would be able to protect more of their data rather than relying on Facebook to protect it. So, which is it, Ben? Does Facebook need to do more to protect our data, or are they already too secure as governments seem to think?
Well, I think the first kind of takeaway for me here is, not only why does Facebook need all of this data necessarily, but also what value are users getting from it at this point? I don't know any way in which Facebook is making our world a better place. And yet they continue to kind of hoover up tons of information about us and hold it in an insecure manner. So that's my initial takeaway here. It just kind of shows the wealth of information that Facebook has on these individuals. And also, all this information is now out there. It can be used for social engineering attacks, for things like SIM swapping, for other phishing scams and things like that. So, everybody be a little more alert, but it's a really disappointing thing to see, even though it comes, on the back of a number of other scandals. That being said, Naomi, as you referenced, kind of the Department of the Home Office, I believe, in the UK is considering, actions to kind of stop or give their government a backdoor into end-to-end encryption, as Facebook is considering implementing it on not only its various instant messaging platforms, but also direct DMs on Instagram and other stuff like that. That news is also unsurprising. We've seen a ton of it in the US, but I think it's worth mentioning that, the FBI, at least here in the US, has tons of ways to access your phone without basically kneecapping encryption around the world. So it's a heck of a way to start a Monday. Let's put it that way. But team, what else you got?
Absolutely. Well, I feel like, Facebook really did a 180 with regards to privacy a couple of years ago. After the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they said, okay, well, we're going to roll out all these privacy policies. We're going to do end-to-end encryption. We're doing all this stuff. And then they had all these hearings in the US where the government was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Yes, we're angry about the Cambridge Analytica thing. We don't like that information. Also, don't make things more private. And then they just went at them. And so Facebook has been putting off all of these privacy things that they've been trying to implement because the governments don't want them to. I feel like there's this big conflict between, users who want their data to be protected, and end-to-end encryption is a great way to ensure this. The less data that Facebook has access to, the more stuff you're encrypting between you and your peers, even though you're using the Facebook system, the more stuff is private, right? You don't have to rely on them. So it's just kind of at odds with what governments want. But Jen, what are your thoughts on this? What do users want? Do they want more privacy on these platforms? Because governments are saying they can't access information about bad guys without getting rid of all privacy on the internet.
What a sad story to start Monday off with. I just keep thinking.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
I just keep thinking about what the alternative is. Facebook has so much of our data and we've given it to them. And a lot of people have created livelihoods on Instagram and Facebook. A lot of small businesses, run and make money from their profiles on Facebook and the other platforms that they own. And so I'm just trying to think about what the alternative is here, and it just sounds super sad. We can start to migrate over to decentralized social platforms, and we talk about that a lot on this show. But as we've seen with COVID, I think it takes a lot to kind of think about rebuilding your business from the ground up. And that's what a lot of these people have to think about. And it's just really sad for me. I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, it's like this conflict, right? Because we do get value giving our data to these companies. You know, the more they know about us, the more that they can target ads to specific groups, the more I can get people who are particularly interested in my business, you know? So it is a very valuable service they're providing. So you bring up a great question, Jen, you know, like figuring out this balance between how much information do we want to give to these companies, how much information is too much, and, you know, how are they securing the information? Because at the end of the day, like, do they need my phone number in order to target specific ads to me? Do they need to keep that in an insecure method?
They need all of this information.
Yeah, Ben.
I think this also gets into a couple different things, right? The end-to-end encryption aspect is important for just communications, like generally, and information that's sent on these communications platforms. So it wouldn't necessarily protect all of, you know, the entirety of the data that you give Facebook anyway when signing up for an account, for example. Like, there's a ton of different security measures that need to be considered here and kind of unpacked. But I do think, like, when we talk about value, right, and like these companies giving people value, like, what does that actually mean? You know, just because I get served maybe an ad for a coat that I don't want, but Facebook thinks I want, like, is that a valuable service that I am being offered? You know, we say it's valuable for businesses, but at the same time, you know, the reason that there's a lot of, you know, sort of decentralized startups and pitches around like ad tech technology is because there's so much ad fraud too in these systems. And so, you know, being able to drive like the exact value, quote unquote, for businesses, I think is a lot more complicated than we're kind of getting at here. So there's, you know, there's encryption, there's security, there's data, and there's advertising. But all of these are questions that we need to be really interrogating as we, you know, just kind of assume like, oh, well, I guess there's no alternative to these, you know, very select few companies that control a large part of the internet.
Yeah,
and with Facebook,
sorry, go ahead, Danny.
with Facebook specifically, it's like in the case of Facebook, we are the product. Like, our data is the product. They're giving us a service for free, but they're monetizing our data, and therefore they have a responsibility to take the protection of that data more seriously. And again with Cambridge Analytica, now with this, we're seeing evidence that they're not taking the steps, however those steps might be, to protect their most valuable product. So this is certainly something that we need to be taking more seriously and pressing companies like Facebook to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I always gave them cut them a bit of slack because they did try to go the privacy route and the government stopped them. But then you have things like the Apple feud with Facebook, where Apple's like, hey, we're going to let users know whenever they're being tracked. And Facebook's like, whoa, that's a bit extreme, right? You really want users to know when we're tracking them? And Apple's like, yeah, we kind of do. Transparency is a good thing. So the fact that they're pushing back so hard against Apple and that transparency does make me second guess all of that as well. But very complex issue. Let's change tracks now, though. Let's talk about XRP. Zach, what have we got there?
Let's talk about XRP. I'm ready to talk about XRP. What we got here is XRP surging to 2-month highs. This in the face of ongoing legal questions as to whether XRP is indeed an illegally issued security from its purported creators, Ripple Labs. I just want to talk about how XRP just cannot be stopped. You know, this is an asset that is rising in value. This is the 7th largest cryptocurrency by market cap, according to some measures. This thing, you just can't stop it. And I just want to talk about what that all means. So I'm going to kick this to Ben, and then we'll go from there. What do you take of XRP being up nearly 30%? In the last 24 hours, and what does that sort of say about the state of the crypto markets?
Yeah, so as our colleague Omkar Gabold, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, he kind of did a story looking at this and somewhat attributed this to Ethereum hitting new all-time highs and then kind of settling around 2000. And that kind of, you know, when Ethereum goes up, so do all the alts. So maybe it's just part of that. But that being said, I mean, you know, XRP stands like fight the FUD. Like, that's what I'm seeing here. Like, they are still purchasing, they're still trading. And I think it does get back to this conversation we've had previously about somewhat the tribalism of crypto. You know, like, people have their camps and they rep them hard. And so, you know, we've also seen a number of other cryptos sort of go through a legal morass of figuring out what's a security, what's not, all these other sort of things. That being said, this was an incredibly like prominent example of that. And it's one that's been going on for years. So maybe this is just people seeing, and I believe in this report, this mentioned, you know, that there was going to be some email back and forth that, you know, were cleared and, you know, given transparency about. And so that might clear up some uncertainty in this regard. But, you know, I think it just shows that people are not willing to kind of get off of some hills and they will die on them if need be.
Yeah, I think, for me, like small brain take, late December, SEC hits Ripple Labs with a major enforcement action. And I'm like, oh, XRP, that's going to zero. That's not good. People are going to flip out. And that has not been the case. So, I guess it's sort of like in the theme of like, are these markets reacting rationally? Like, what is this? What is the indicator here that is making people feel encouraged about this asset? I'll kick this to Naomi. What's your take on the matter, right? XRP is up. A bunch of other coins are up. Is there a greater meaning here that we can ascribe to this, or is this just the nature of the crypto markets?
Well, I think that there have been a lot of things unraveling in the XRP case if you actually look at how that's continued. So this case was put in the final hours of former SEC Chair Jay Clayton's tenure. And it was a lot to unpack. And then we get Gary Gensler in and he's having to sort out this mess because we're starting to realize that perhaps the SEC's case is not as strong as we thought. There are a lot of things that we're learning in recent weeks about this case. And I mean, it could have something to do with that. But if you also look at Library, just also recently sued by the SEC, and their token was up 15%. They never even took a hit. So, I just wonder whether this is just giving, exposure to some of these currencies. I would have expected XRP not to bounce back because their whole game is, well, we're regulated. We're the government coin. We're a settlement layer. So I thought, like, if they're being sued by the SEC, well, that gets rid of their whole use case. I can understand the Library case, if suddenly that goes up because everyone's hearing about it and it's in the news and all that. So this is surprising news to me that XRP is bouncing back and very interesting. But Ben, what were you going to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, is this a case, though, of us being a little bit too U.S.-centric in this regard? Like, the SEC can totally take action, right? But these are currencies that go, like, beyond just the reach of the U.S. And to me, this shows, in some sense, maybe there is some resiliency. And this is kind of, the whole proposal of cryptocurrencies generally is one government cannot control them. So that's an initial question that I have here is, are we focusing on this just a little too much when maybe XRP users outside the U.S. are still going strong?
You got it.
Yeah,
So nearly...
Great question.
I'll kick this to Danny. So, Danny, nearly 5 months after this major SEC enforcement action against Ripple Labs, what's the story about XRP here in spring 2021? What should we be looking out for here?
I mean, I'd say that we've talked a little bit about this. A rising tide lifts all boats. So you've got that going on here. But then what Ben was getting to earlier, just the tenacity of the XRP army, they're not going to be dissuaded by any SEC enforcement action, even if it means that Ripple and XRP could ultimately get iced out of a major financial market. That would presumably have a huge impact on its usefulness to other businesses around the world, because XRP has always built itself as a way for banks and institutions to settle their payments in a form more efficiently than SWIFT and other major banking systems. So I would say that this rally is divorced from reality, and it's just people are pushing XRP up, even though the chances that it could maintain or even rather establish itself as a dominant payment system, it's diminishing in the wake of this suit.
Yeah, worth remembering that this is a coin that is still suspended from most of the major U.S.-based crypto exchanges. So, hearkening to Ben's point about this maybe being more of an international phenomenon is something that is worth remembering. Lots to watch there. I'm going to throw it to a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, we are going to talk about MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor. What else? Buying more Bitcoin. Stick with us. It's The Hash. We'll be back in a sec.
Welcome back to The Hash, where we talk about the latest and greatest in crypto news. So we got Michael Saylor coming up, but I want to talk about another Michael first, Michael Mosier, who was the former CTO of Chain Analysis and was at FinCEN, but has recently been appointed the new acting director of the Financial Crimes Network Enforcement boggled that one. But anyway, FinCEN has a chain analysis CTO as its new head. So, Naomi, we care about privacy on this show. We care about security. What are kind of the signals that this sends to you as somebody watching this space really closely?
I mean, it's just the revolving door of enforcement and these private companies that are offering services to government. It's constant. I think there's a lot of lobbying you see from these chain analytics firms who are saying, that's a phone that's going off, who are saying that, you need more transparency. We can provide the tools. They get these contracts. You got these regulators that set up shop, and then they leave the government world, and then they go to the private sector world, and they work in these chain analytics firms. Then the revolving door continues. They go back into government, and you saw that with the BIT license with Ben Lawsky. You've seen it with a whole bunch of different government regulatory bodies. It's not new. It doesn't surprise me, but it does make me feel icky. I'm not a fan of these chain analytics companies. I am not a fan of cryptocurrency being so open and lacking so much privacy, and then these companies really working to undercut what little privacy we have on there. So that's sort of my immediate take on all of this. FinCEN, obviously they purport themselves, they say that they're protecting people and they're going after the bad guys, but the reality is they're actually going after all of us. They're undercutting all of our privacy, so everyone kind of gets hurt with their privacy and with these firms kind of digging into blockchains like this. But I don't know, Ben, what's your take on all of this? Because you have a pretty interesting
well, I'm going to toss it to Zack initially, and then I'll take that one because I definitely have thoughts.
All right, cool. I'll be quick. I feel like this is sort of a continuation of that Jesse Powell tweet that we talked about, I guess, late last month about, crypto and its, the inability for it to be ignored any longer, right? So this is a rising asset class. This is something that everyone and their mother is paying attention to, and it would seem to follow that would also apply to financial regulators in the US and other major economies. So this to me is like, another signal in that story that, was highlighted, I thought, pretty capably by Jesse Powell, obviously the CEO of Kraken, a big crypto exchange here in the US. So that to me is like what this is, just the inability to be ignored. And, another way to say that is, okay, it's becoming a mainstream concern, and therefore it's going to attract mainstream interest from financial regulators. It would make sense that they would seek out someone who has this background in an emerging asset class that an authority like FinCEN would like to pay attention to clearly a bit more. So that's me. I'm going to pass it to Ben because you got this.
Well, yeah, apologize. We all know what my apartment doorbell sounds like now because work from home boundaries are non-existent, apparently. But back to the story, I think this does show a higher level of interest in cryptocurrencies generally. I mean, the fact that you have a former chain analysis CTO as the acting head of FinCEN, kind of says that there's a body of knowledge that might not have been there previously in a larger capacity, even 4 years ago. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what actions are taken. That being said, too, I see a lot of parallels between FinCEN and between blockchain surveillance firms like Chainalysis. When I was reporting on FinCEN late last year in terms of it being another huge repository of data because of suspicious activity reports, talking to former employees, I got some pushback that said, look, we're in a really hard place. We are we are mandated by legislation to be sort of a traffic point for all of these suspicious activity reports that banks and financial institutions are filing, where law enforcement can then come to us and access them. So they're kind of like this middleman. And I think, chain analytics firms see themselves in a similar light. I also reported last year on how some people consider these groups like digital mercenaries. And in talking to Chainalysis, actually, Chainalysis said, we just provide services. We work with governments and we go and look at the blockchain and we give them some data and then they can analyze it however they want. So I think there is a mindset here that, both FinCEN and firms like Chainalysis see themselves as a little bit stuck and not with a good way out. So I'm curious to see how that's going to be moving forward. But Jen, jump in here.
Well, I'm just curious. We talk a lot about maintaining our privacy on the show. We talk a lot about the need for more clarity when it comes to regulation. And so it sounds to me like we really are calling for some kind of happy medium somewhere. And Naomi, my question is for you. What does that happy medium look like?
Well, I mean, you had the previous director of FinCEN, he's stepping down soon, and he said, we already have regulations stopping fraud. We already have all the regulations we need. We do not need industry-specific regulation for the blockchain world because all the laws to stop bad, actors already exist. So, I see a lot of these, blockchain-specific laws and chain analytics firms trying to beef up laws and all of this stuff as unnecessary. I think that it's, we are just creating more regulation and more red tape, and things get more confusing than ever, and it's unnecessary. So yeah, I don't like seeing bad guys prosper. I don't like seeing bad guys get away with stuff. I don't like seeing good guys having a surveillance state watching their every move either. So it's a difficult question for sure. But let's change track and to talk about the other Michael. We've got MicroStrategy news. What is that?
All right. Well, MicroStrategy has purchased 253 more Bitcoin valued at $15 million. And this puts their total holdings at just over 91,000 Bitcoin. I think it's like 91.5. And I want to tie this to something that came out of JP Morgan last week. They released a report that said the cryptocurrency could reach $130,000 if volatility continues to decline. So there's a lot of things to unpack here. I think what's most pressing for me is that while MicroStrategy's success now, I guess, relies heavily on the success of Bitcoin, Michael Saylor still has a business to run. And so I want to talk about an investor, like what investors should be thinking, like if you're investing in MicroStrategy, you still have to be pretty confident that MicroStrategy is going to be successful. And if you're investing in MicroStrategy solely for the fact that they are so heavily invested in Bitcoin, why not just invest in Bitcoin? And so I kind of want to throw that out to the panel. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so in talking with MicroStrategy executives, I've actually heard that they're planning on building products for the blockchain ecosystem. They're not just buying Bitcoin, they're planning on building out their presence in the space. What that will look like, it's still to be determined, but across hiring posts and the plans that they've put out publicly in their conferences, they've made clear that their interest in Bitcoin is going deeper than just purchasing the crypto. And I mean, we're getting to the point where these little $15 million buys, I see this news and I think, okay, it's just another Monday. Michael Saylor is buying more Bitcoin, and the company's thinking that too. If you look at their website, they've completely done away with big PR pushes for this news. They just have a headline: MicroStrategy buys Bitcoin, and then they link to the SEC filing, and that's it. So it's like a very commonplace for a company that has said on the record, our business strategy is twofold: one, enterprise software, and two, buy more Bitcoin. And we plan on doing the Bitcoin buying very often.
Danny, I'm doubling down here. You are like the only person I think on this panel, certainly not myself, who has like actually talked to Michael Saylor about this. So like, what does enterprise software mean here? I can't help but, look at MicroStrategy and be like, but what do they actually do? So if you have any more information there, please, I would love to hear it.
Absolutely. So I've covered MicroStrategy since last August, and it took me the better part of 8 months to figure out what their 20-year business actually was. I have determined that they are in the business of software, and their main offering before all this Bitcoin stuff was creating tools that helped companies have better access to viewing their customer data and utilizing it better. So that's a model a lot of companies are pursuing now. Of course, the novel thing that MicroStrategy does is YOLO all of their money into Bitcoin all of the time. So it definitely keeps things exciting, and hearing from executives that they plan on building out enterprise software for blockchain and for Bitcoin perhaps, that is an encouraging sign that they might be developing on this front more so than just buying and holding.
Yeah, now I want to talk about...
Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Naomi.
I was going to say, that's a lot of Bitcoin. Like, I feel like we need a placeholder in every show that's just like, so how much did MicroStrategy buy in Bitcoin today? And we just update people because it's just like, is there going to be a point where enough is enough, Because MicroStrategy at this stage is issuing more and more debt in the name of their company in order to leverage that and buy more Bitcoin. It's not just that they're taking their treasury reserve assets and saying, well, these will be Bitcoin. They're taking everything. Like, everything is Bitcoin now. So I just feel like is there going to be a point where enough is enough and Michael's like, okay, I've had enough now. I'm not going to buy any more. Or is this kind of like just this need that is unable to be quenched now?
Maybe we can get a ticker in the corner of our screen that just ticks up every time they buy more.
We'll need
Bitcoin.
to have a percentage. How much Bitcoin does Michael Saylor not own yet? And until that percentage has got to zero, and he owns the world, we're going to be continuing on this trend.
Yeah, I do think it's an important question, though, because like until that enterprise software gets built out in a way that's like observable for investors, getting back to your initial point, like just the continuous doubling down, like would like give me as an investor pause, particularly when you see MicroStrategy stock like trading now as basically a proxy Bitcoin stock. And given that volatility, particularly if you're an investor, you might be a little bit concerned about that. But Zach, what you got?
I mean, they've been around for a while. I mean, they've been around, I think, since the early 90s, like 20 or 30 years. And, they have like 3,000 people. So it's not necessarily like a fly-by-net operation. I think we sort of like the appearance of that happens because, again, like the novel thing here is that as of August, they started YOLOing into Bitcoin at all times. So, I mean, I think the funny thing, my favorite MicroStrategy story is the time that they sold the voice.com domain to Block One for $30 million. And that opened Michael Saylor's eyes to the power of cryptocurrency. So they've been doing this for a while. Yeah. I think that's right. Danny, can you fact check me on that? That is what happened, right? It was $30 million sold to Block One.
Yes, it was the single largest sale of a domain name in history at the time.
Yes, and Michael Saylor early on was like, Bitcoin is trash. Bitcoin is going to zero. And then he got this big check from, Brendan Bloomer and the folks at Block One. And I think he started thinking about it a little bit more seriously after that. That's at least the telling in Danny Nelson's fabulous year in review piece that featured Michael Saylor prominently. So, I think, this is a Bitcoin proxy stock for big institutional investors who, may by mandate not be able to hold the digital asset themselves. So in a rising market, it may be the next best thing for many folks, including Morgan Stanley and others. I think I'm going to toss it to Danny. We're going to talk about some other stuff. Danny, what do you got?
Absolutely. So over in Russia, the deputy head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is worried that Russia might get iced out of the SWIFT banking settlement system, which is the major payment rails that banks use to move money around the world. And he's saying that Russia should be experimenting with more advanced technology. And he's mentioned blockchain as a potential avenue for that more advanced technology. Now, Russia has been musing with its relationship with SWIFT since 2014, when it was iced out of began to get iced out of the financial system because of the invasion of Crimea. But the blockchain angle might be something new. So, I mean, I'm wondering, amid all this report of, XRP booming, is there a chance that Russia might be switching to XRP? This is coming out of left field, but Naomi, what do you think?
Whoa, that's a big thing to take that. I mean, I think that's super
just summon the army,
obviously, right?
I have.
Obviously, the decentralized world of blockchain is built exactly for this purpose. When you have monopolies on things, when you have certain countries that have a stranglehold over the payment rails of the entire world, and then you get sanctions. Crypto is really a way to get around these strangleholds. It's decentralized for better or worse. The good guys could use it, the bad guys could use it. It's just a technology. But I think that's what's exciting about blockchain technology. And there was kind of a twofold message in what Russia's saying, because on the one hand, they say SWIFT is antiquated, SWIFT is old and hasn't been improved on in a really long time, and we could do so much better, and the tech is really bad. But then, so it's kind of like this, insult to the system. But then they're also saying, well, we might be frozen out of this, and yes, we rely on it, and yes, we need to find better methods that we could still use. So blockchain is great in that there are no barriers and anyone can use this technology. So it's kind of interesting to see that. XRP, their role in this, I don't know. That's a real big take there. I would be very surprised, but it's not off the cards. Ben, what's your thought?
I think it's off the cards. I don't think that's going to happen. But but I will say,
Ben,
look, I think it makes
so negative lately.
I'm not at all. I'm just saying, I just don't think that's going to be the route that, the state of Russia takes with its alternative SWIFT system. No, but I think look, it makes sense for Russia to look at this from a perspective of what are our alternatives? Just because it is, SWIFT is so dominant across the world right now, and Russia is not unfamiliar with sanctions. It's been the victim of them a number of different times. That being said, I don't think blockchain makes a whole lot of sense for them in this context. Whether we're looking at CBDCs in China, whether we're looking at monetary control in the U.S., and whether we're looking at control in the state of Russia, they're not interested in decentralization for the freedom it brings users. And for any state, I don't think that's going to be a hugely appealing aspect to them. They want to maintain control. To me, this is interesting because it shows another way that, blockchain and cryptocurrencies generally are becoming part of a geopolitical struggle. And so this to me much more kind of is in that vein than it is the actual adoption of this. So while it makes sense, I don't think there would be any sort of public blockchain aspect here that would, kind of transgress borders, Naomi, as you mentioned, just because it's not in the interests of the state.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree slightly there because there are twofold that you need to maintain control, right? Because as you said, we kind of have this anarchic world and these countries that want power over other countries. And so there are people who want decentralization, want their control back. And so I can see a route where we have different countries saying, hey, let's use a non-national currency as our reserve currency. You're seeing the predominance of the US dollar as reserve currency. I think it's dipped down below 60%. Like a decade ago, it was up 90 or something. So it's US dollar is losing power and their systems are losing power. People looking for alternatives. So I agree, Russia does not want their citizens to have control and take back their power. But I think blockchain tech is very interesting when you think about the entire globe. And as you said, this geopolitical struggle we're seeing.
Yeah, and for the record, I think that there's absolutely no chance that Russia turns to XRP in this time of crisis. The motherland has no use for an unregistered security, allegedly.
Thanks, Danny. That was super smooth. Let's wrap on that. That was good stuff. Thanks for tuning into the Hash today, folks. It's Monday, April 5th. We're going to do it again tomorrow. We're here every day, every weekday. It's good times. I'm Zach. We got Naomi. We got Ben. We got Jen. We got Danny. Stick with us on CoinDesk TV at 3 p.m. We have All About Bitcoin. And then our full slate of programming resumes tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with First Mover. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
All right, have a good day.